Welcome back to Am Sam Marino, the podcast for creatives. It is I, the mayor, Flobo Boys, in the mayor's office with those who are doing things to help out the community. Once again, please welcome Dr. Otto Phillips here. How's it going, sir?
Good. I'm excited to be here. Since last we were together, I'm really excited on this new adventure that with cultural intelligence, my neighbor next door.
Oh, my pleasure. But first questions first. How was your Easter? Was it good? Was it great? Was it somewhere in the middle?
It was great. As a matter of fact, I had my daughter visit me, and so that was great. And so we're excited about that. And of course, it's always measured by what is happening in globally. It's measured by the stuff that is going on in Ukraine that is on everybody's mind, and the injustices that are being perpetrated upon a people. So
Yeah.
we are concerned about that, and I think that colored Easter this year.
Yeah, absolutely. But
And
let's
how
talk
was
about
yours? How was
My,
yours?
my my Easter was pretty good. You know,
Great.
I was still here. My mom is at our summer home or winter home
Yeah.
in the West Indies. My dad is in New York, so I just did the
Okay.
whole distance
Okay.
thing,
Great.
kind of called.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
But we're
Great.
we're we're gathered here today to talk about your newest release, and it's called
Mhm.
"My Neighbor Next Door: Reaching
Yeah.
Out Communities Through the Culture Intelligence." Now, for someone who may not be initiated, that is a mouthful. What exactly is culture intelligence, and why do you feel the need that to write this and put this for?
Yeah. Cultural intelligence. More than 40 years ago, IQ was the motivation for human resource in terms of getting people.
Mhm.
And what they did was they sought for people with high IQ. And then beginning in 1970 and later than that, we found out that a lot of individuals who ordinarily were competent, we found that in certain moments they exploded. And so they got into what is called emotional intelligence to make
Correct.
sure that people are emotionally stable. And then about 20 years ago, with globalization, Flobo,
Hmm.
people going all over the world, companies going to China, to Russia, to Europe, to different parts of the Caribbean, and particularly in Latin America, we found that individuals who were ordinarily competent, when put in a different situation in the midst of a different culture, were not able to adapt and adjust. So, what is the definition of cultural intelligence?
Right.
Cultural intelligence is the ability to adjust adequately and appropriately in the midst of interaction with people from different cultures. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
therefore, if you look at a straight line, to the ability to interact is one thing, but the ability to adapt and to adjust while you are interacting is a different thing. And that's where cultural intelligence comes in, or CQ, as we
Okay.
call
Yeah.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of maybe it's a stereotype. I heard that like Americans as a whole are pretty hard at adjusting to new cultures when we travel abroad.
Yeah,
We
that's
always go
right.
like we're used to one thing and then something else.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Mhm.
So, with the relates to my neighbor next door, it comes chock full of research. You could tell it was painstakingly crafted. Walk me through that first. Of having the idea of saying, you know what, I want to share this knowledge with others. What was your research like leading up to this release?
Well, I think demographics led this. The immigration issue led this. The denominations over the last decades have spent millions of dollars going overseas
Hmm.
to take the gospel. And it is a part of the commission that most Christians believe that our task is to take the gospel to different people. However, rather over the last 30, 40 years, immigration and outmigration has changed.
Right.
So God has a good sense of humor. So whereas people used to go overseas to take the gospel, now those people to whom we took the gospel are now in our neighborhood.
Mm.
Those immigrants are in our neighborhood, and the challenge flow before the church is to be able to reach these people with the gospel, and to be able to adequately adapt and adjust so that the message could reach to those individuals. So that's why, as an immigrant myself,
Hmm.
I felt that I had to explore this possibility of how could the church position itself in order to deal with the immigration patterns that we're seeing. However, there is a warning.
Okay.
Um, 30, 40 years ago, we thought that America was a melting pot.
Right.
That has been dismissed over the last few years. America is not a melting pot. America is a salad bowl.
Okay.
So therefore, when people come here, we don't expect them to assimilate. But what we have to be able to do is to be able to take these people, take the gospel to these individuals in such a way that we do not deny them of their own particular culture. But we have to be able to say to individuals, yes, come in, but we must understand the culture before we are able to reach them.
Is it an issue like when it comes down to like knowing how to drive, where someone always believes they're the best driver on the freeway? Does everyone always believe they're the most culturally open and they have to be taught that they have blind spots, or it takes a certain person to say, well, maybe I want to learn more about this particular subject?
I think we make a big mistake, Flo. If we think that we can dismiss the intricacies of culture, we make a big mistake.
Correct.
When we try to describe culture, there are four different metaphors that we use for culture. Culture is like a tree. That the bark of a tree, the trunk of a tree, with that over the years, all the climate has contributed to it. So therefore, culture is like that tree. Culture is also like a quilt. You have different parts that have come together. Culture is also like a computer. You have the software and you have the hardware, and we must understand that. But the one that I like most is that culture is like an iceberg.
Okay.
20% is at the top, and 80% is at the bottom. So what we have to do with culture is to be able to understand what we see is called the artifacts and the result of years of indoctrination and being assimilated in that particular culture. So therefore, what we say is that we have to be able to take time to understand what is below the surface so that we can understand what accounted for the behaviors that we see.
It's a good point. I was actually had a good time to check out the book. It was very easy to read, very pick up and play. I know it
Yeah.
sounds like a very
Thank you.
complex situation, but you take the time to break things down
Yeah.
for someone who may be new to, which is very, very important. But
Yeah.
you mentioned throughout the book about the four levels of cultural intelligence: CQ drive, CQ knowledge, CQ strategy, and CQ action. Just real quick, what are they and how do they interact with each other?
So therefore, we call them the four quadrants of cultural intelligence. So first of all, in order to be able to adequately adjust, we have to check our CQ drive or our motivation. What is it that is motivating us to want to reach another culture? So we check our motivation. Is it because of the gospel? What is motivating us? Is it that what is the driving force? And if we understand what drives us, because multicultural ministry, cross-cultural ministry is hard work, and we have to check our motivation. Secondly, is what we call CQ knowledge. In other words, you must take the time to study the culture. You must take the time to understand why people act the way they act. So therefore, we study and we get as much knowledge as we could. That's CQ knowledge. And then we have CQ strategy. You've got to have a strategy in order to be able to reach another people. So therefore, you have the motivation and you have the knowledge, but with that, you are able then to develop a strategy to know how do you adjust when you reach people of a different culture. And then of course CQ action is how then when we have gotten a hold of the CQ drive, the CQ knowledge and CQ strategy, how do we then how are we flexible?
Right.
So what I say is you don't use cruise control when you're working with different cultures. You don't use cruise control. What you do is every every situation that you find yourself, you must check yourself as to then how then do I adjust and
Yeah.
adapt? So, and my actions to suit those individuals.
So, in the course of reading this book, I was kind of seeing the flip side of things,
Yeah,
especially for people like people of color, people from ethnically other place. I'm
sure.
from New York, where there are many flavors of Black people. For example, my parents are West Indian. We
Yeah,
weren't African American, but a lot of times people try to observe our culture, much like how we say we should. But on the
yeah,
receiving end, it can be seen as a veil of hostility. I understand that understanding is a two-way street, but for
yeah.
those of you who are being observed, any tips, tricks that through your research you found out how they can find a way to teach others about your culture in a way that's accessible?
Yeah, but the mistake that we make though is that we are always hung up in making sure that other people understand us.
Mm-hmm.
It is critical not just so that other people understand us, but we must understand other people.
Agreed. Yeah.
There's a reason why people drive on the right hand side or drive on the left hand side. There's a reason why people do all of these things. And so flexibility is critical in cultural intelligence. We must be flexible as we deal with people from different cultures. It's the only way that we can reach them. However, in terms of a religious perspective, I think that we must understand that from a Christian perspective, that God is already working in different cultures. Our job is to be able to find God and to join God in what God is doing in the different cultures. Now,
Sure.
there's an old Indian saying that don't give me a potted plant, but give me the seed and I will plant it in my own soil.
Okay.
So that the gospel, that the task that we have is not to Christianize the culture, but to culturalize Christianity. And to be able to put it in that perspective, what is the culture? How does that culture, how does that vessel receive the gospel?
How can someone improve their CQ right now today? I know there's a long-term process, there's training programs for that, but I mean today, if I want to make that first step, what should I do?
I think the most critical thing is CQ knowledge. We must understand the culture, and in understanding the culture, there are values, there are universal values that you have in all cultures. For instance, time.
Mhm.
There is what you call event time and clock time. So that there are certain cultures that are hung up. America is obsessed with time. However, other cultures are not obsessed with time. They are event oriented. There is also, as we look at universal values, there is what you will call avoidance, uncertainty avoidance. There are some cultures that are loose when it comes to uncertainty avoidance, and so that we have to. So CQ knowledge, I think, is critical. We must take the time to study the culture, to study why do people behave the way they behave, so that at least we will be able to appreciate that culture.
Yeah, you touched upon my favorite part of the book, actually, the clock time versus event time. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's like in cultures like the United States, we do things by clock. 9 o'clock,
Yeah,
10 o'clock, 10:30, 1:30. Where there's other cultures kind of like we're having the meeting, and when it's done, we're doing something else. And it's
yeah,
kind of a fascinating dynamic because when we think about other cultures, we already think about like the physical, like clothes or
yeah,
how they
sure,
look
sure,
or things. But
sure.
as far as you live your daily life, I mean, that right there is the underpinning. I thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah, and the fact is, I served in a denomination in a white denomination before I got to where I am today, and most of the times I would go to Caucasian churches, white churches, who allowed a Hispanic church or a Haitian church to have a congregation there. But whenever I go to these congregations, they always tell me, "Could you teach these people how to be on time?" Well, of course they are event oriented. The party is over when the party is over. Service is over when service is over. So what I say to these folks, if you're going to have a Hispanic congregation or a Haitian congregation or a third world congregation, why not give them 2 o'clock in the afternoon rather than 9 o'clock in the morning and tell them that they ought to be out by 10 o'clock. They're not going to be out because they are event oriented. So, in order to avoid that clash, I think as we study the cultures, we are then able to be able to adjust differently.
Is having a high CQ an individual goal? Can a culture in mass have a high CQ, or is it really on the individuals and their responsibility to improve their CQ?
I think it starts with individuals.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I think it is important for a dominant culture church that wants to reach people from different cultures. They must choose individuals who they can teach, and then of course it become a collective endeavor and enterprise. So I think it begins with the individual, and then of course it moves on to a people or to a group of people. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You reached out to the Church of Living Edge in Longwood, Florida, to write the foreword about this one. Walk me through that. Like, what was that call like? Like, I'm writing this book. Took me years of research. I need to drop a nice little feature track on it.
Yeah, Bishop Mark Chirona. I was pastoring a church in Orlando, Flo,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a call from Mark Chirona, and Bishop Mark Chirona told me, he says, "Look, guy, you don't know me, but I've been reading some of your literature, and we need to meet." He's got a 4,000 member church out in Longwood, and this is a white guy. But if you go to his website and you see what his staff looks like, and they always say you have to hire the people that you're trying to reach. And when you look at his staff, you see the diversity that is there. So Mark Chirona, to me, is an individual who is culturally competent, and be able to have a church that has such diversity. And so I asked him to write the foreword to the book. And of course, I just wish my mother were alive to see the things that he wrote. But I thought he was very flowery in his expression. But he's a great guy in terms of understanding cultural intelligence.
Is that kind of like a byproduct of your deciding to write these books for others, to connect with another people of church in the community on that level, and say, hey, look, help me out on my project to push your ideas out there? I mean, what's that like? Is pick up a phone call, asking for favors and friends?
Well, because I think that I must say, I don't have a problem with a white church. I don't have a problem with a Hispanic church. I don't have a problem with a Haitian church or a Filipino church. What I do have a problem with is when a church is not able to welcome people of different cultures.
Correct.
And so people who have known me have understood quite well that while I'm an advocate for ethnic specific churches, I am also an advocate for multicultural churches where churches have made a decision to be diverse. I think that this is where cultural intelligence comes in. So I've called all my guys and I've told them, look, man, I'm getting involved in this, and I think it's a great enterprise. I enjoy writing this book. It's a great book. I got involved in cultural intelligence about 12 years ago through the Cultural Intelligence Center in Detroit with Dr. Livermore, David Livermore, who is really an expert in this. But I think that we are on to something in terms of the Christian experience in evangelism and missiology.
Well, 12 years ago, how has that evolved? How has that evolved? How's that changed? I know if it's something that you really believe in, it has its own little morphing thing to it. It can adapt, it can update. What have you seen in your 12-year experience?
Well, as I see the mega churches, I think have gotten the message, and mega churches are more diverse than the smaller churches. And I really appreciate what churches have done, large congregations have done that are monocultural, that have sought just intensely to be able to reach the people, because our neighborhoods have changed. If our neighborhoods have changed, then we have to reach those people, and they are a different culture.
What do you think is the biggest barrier in far of increasing your CQ? What is day to day? Is it the media? Is it just prejudicial notions? Is it bad experiences? What prevents people from hitting that next level of CQ?
Fear of the unknown. I pastored a church in Orlando, which was an all-white church. And over the years, I know in the first year, the church changed. Because I'm a Caribbean person, a lot of Caribbeans began coming to the church. But I think there is a fear of the unknown. We don't know the other culture, and because we don't know the other culture, we are a little hesitant. But I think if congregations will take the time to understand, to study the other culture, then I think the task becomes much easier.
And like you mentioned in the book, planning social activities, always a good idea. Right?
Yeah. For instance, there is for instance, there with a monocultural congregation, let's say a white congregation,
Yeah.
reaches out and there's a young lady, a black young lady who joins the church, and they have a social event where they cook, everybody cook and bring it, bring the food. But that young lady, all she knows how to cook is chicken feet. And so she cooks chicken feet because her culture appreciates chicken feet. But she cooks chicken feet and she brings it to the church. And on Saturday afternoon, they have a cookout, and nobody is eating the chicken feet. And they look at it and they say, oh, ooh. However, a church that is culturally competent will understand quite well. Here is a young lady from a different culture. She has cooked what she knows how to cook. And somebody ought to be smart enough to say, hey, make sure you try a chicken foot. Because if that young lady stands up there who has just joined the church 4 or 5 months ago, and here she has spent the whole night cooking chicken feet, and yet nobody wants to, it's an assault on her own idea of what a social event ought to be. So we ought to be very careful. But as we fraternize and we mix with people of different cultures, it's the best way to understand people of different cultures.
Yeah, I'm going to be like on vacation somewhere years from now. And they're going to be, hey, Flo, do you want to dance the tango? And I'll be like, no. And I was like, wait, think of the chicken feet. And yes, I will stand up and I will tango to my heart's content.
Yeah.
Making sure everyone's welcome. That is God's path.
Right.
That's the reason why Enoch walked with God. So I respect the heck out of that.
Because there are three, I usually say that in terms of a diverse congregation, there are some things that I think we ought to be careful as we deal with. Number one is politics. When you get into a diverse congregation, you have to understand that people have a certain political proclivity. Black people, by and large, are Democrats. And we have to understand that a monocultural Caucasian congregation cannot expect that Black people who have traditionally and historically been Democrats, you can't expect them to leave their politics at the door. Secondly, is sex. You have to understand with a monocultural congregation, if you have a lot of Hispanic guys coming in or Black guys coming in, they're going to start messing with your daughters.
Oh, wow.
So that particular area is an area in which we have to be very careful as we understand that as we want to be a multicultural congregation, there is going to be that kind of reaction. And thirdly, is food, that we understand people have different tastes, and the only way you can get on nicely and appropriately is to be able to appreciate the foods from other people.
My Neighbor Next Door, Reaching Our Communities Through Cultural Intelligence, is available now, right? How can someone connect to get a copy of themselves right now?
Amazon, man. Amazon does it all.
And I know. I'm trying to set you up. Come on, bro. Why you asking?
The book is available for $19.95. The paperback is available for $19.95. You can get a Kindle copy for $11.95, or you can go to my website, www.thediaconia.com, and it is a great book. And get it for somebody, get it for your friend, get it for your a person of a different culture who is trying at least to be culturally competent.
Real quick, what number book is this? Because you write all the time. You're a machine.
This is number 20.
Oh, congratulations, man.
Thank you. And so the next one is going to be on Vernon Johns, who was the predecessor to Dr. Martin Luther King at
Yeah.
that church. And Vernon Johns was an activist. As a matter of fact, they got rid of Vernon Johns because of his political and religious activism. And who would they get but Dr. Martin Luther King, who is a super activist. So that's going to be my next book.
Oh, well, keep on the eye lookout for that. Dr. Phillips,
Yes.
always a pleasure to have you on New Amsterdam Radio. Again, if
Yes.
someone want to connect with you on your website or elsewhere on social, how do they go about doing that?
www.thediaconia.com. They get onto there, or they can call me on my cell phone, 407-600-7620, and they'll surely get me. But I appreciate all the support I've gotten from your people, and I look forward to further interaction with you.